What's up guys, Cliff here from the Sunday Drive. Today we're installing this Stage 2 Dorch fuel pump on this G30 behind me. It's a 540 and this is the B58 fuel pump. All right, so welcome back to the channel guys. As always, we get our parts through Keys Motorsports. These will be linked down in the description. And if you have any questions about the parts or tools used, definitely shoot us a message. And if you're interested in having us install this part on your car, be sure to send us an email. We'll have our info down in the description. So today we have the Stage 2 Dorch fuel pump. Now, a couple things to note. This is a G30 B58, but it's a 2017. If you have a 2020 or newer G30, this mod is not compatible. I also don't believe they have one yet for the G20 B58, although they do have one for the F series 340 B58 motor. So definitely make sure before you start this install that you have the right fuel pump for your car. And if you're not sure, be sure to reach out to the guys at Keys and they'd be happy to help you out, or send us a message and we'll do our best to help you as well. All right, so the nice thing about the Dorch kit, unlike a lot of the guys that go with like a super upgrade and go that route, is everything you need is gonna be here. There's not gonna be any pushing parts around to make them fit. Everything is gonna fit well and as it's designed. This kit includes a new low pressure fuel line that's gonna go to the stock fueling system, as well as a new and differently designed fuel rail. There's also a spacer we're gonna be installing and all new mounting bolts and hardware. So complete kit, it's gonna have everything you need. Very simple install. Let's get started. All right, so I recommend it before you even install your fuel pump that you make sure you can tune the car. If you've been to the dealer recently, it's possible even if you tune the vehicle once, they've relocked your DME and you don't want to spend the time installing the fuel pump just to realize you can't tune it for that upgraded fuel pump. So we're connected up to the customer's car right here, and we're gonna go down to My Maps. He's already running a Stage 2 93 tune. And where you're gonna go is in here and up to this config button in the top right. You're gonna wanna scroll down to where it says HPFP, high pressure fuel pump, and then you're gonna select the fuel pump. He went with a Dorch Stage 2, and obviously it's gonna give you a warning. Make sure you're on OEM unless you've actually upgraded your fuel pump. So we're gonna flash it since we are upgrading that. All right, so we've saved the changes. And now you're not done yet. You still want to make sure that you can flash it actually. So we're going to hit flash. Press here to flash now. And as always, it's a good idea to have your car hooked up to a battery tender, especially if this is your first time flashing the vehicle. That always takes a little bit longer. And make sure you have the right tender, depending on if you have a lithium or a standard lead acid battery. All right, and we have success. There we go. Now it does say, please turn on the ignition off, wait 5 seconds and start the car. Do not start the car unless the fuel pump is actually installed. So if you're doing this as a pre-test, make sure you don't start the car. If you want, you could flash it back to the previous map without the fuel pump and then reflash it again afterwards with the new fuel pump, now that you know you can successfully flash the car. All right, now with the battery disconnected, we're ready to get started up front. Now you're gonna notice we have the air box out as well as the inlet and some other peripherals here. This is not required. We just installed this FTP charge pipe, which we have an installation guide up. If it's not up, it will be up soon. So we decided just to leave this stuff out in case we would drop something. We just have more access to it, but none of this needs to be removed. The only area you have to focus on is right here. Now you do want to let the vehicle sit for a while before you crack these open. That will bleed a lot of the pressure out of the system. If the battery's connected, anytime you even touch a door handle on the car, it will pressurize the system automatically. So having the battery disconnected and letting this sit for a while is a good idea. This has been sitting for about an hour and a half or so now while we installed the charge pipe. But we've went ahead and put these microfiber towels here to catch any gas that may come out. One thing to note, you do not want to get any fuel on your coil pack. So you'll notice we have all our coil pack wires right here. We had to change the spark plugs on this car too. It's tuned to a Stage 2 boot mode tune, so he needed the step colder spark plugs. So we just finished installing those, and we decided, since You definitely don't want to get fuel on the boots of the spark plug because it can cause them to fail, or boots of the coil packs rather, can cause them to fail. We decided just to leave them out. So the new plugs are installed, so it's not the end of the world if something falls down in there. But we're leaving the coil packs out just to be safe. You can do this though with the coil packs in there, just be extra careful if you do. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is take a 17 millimeter line wrench like this. It's always a good idea to use a line wrench on these to make sure you don't round them out, and just crack all of these open so that any fuel that's still in there can drain out. Oh. Definitely still pressurized, okay? That's been sitting a while. All right, so definitely still some fuel coming out of that, and that's crazy because this car has been sitting for about an hour and a half, like I said, and normally, at least on the N55s, because I've changed a lot of fuel pumps on those cars, all of that is usually drained out by then. So make sure if you do spray any fuel like I did, you go through and thoroughly clean that up. Now this one's not gonna probably spray as much because all that pressure just got released in that first one. And we are gonna have to remove this back shrouding, but I like to do this first because they recommend once you crack them open to let them sit for like 10 minutes or so before you fully remove the fuel line, just to make sure that any excess fuel has left the system, at least as much as possible. Now there's one more connection we have to get at the back right here, but before I do that, let's remove some of this back shrouding. All right, so there's a rubber grommet back here, and rather than trying to pull this cover off of that, you're most likely gonna damage it. If you go underneath with a nice wide pry tool like this, well, this one linked, you can get under there and just pry that up like that, and now nothing's messed up. And you have another one right over here. A little trickier to get to, but a nice long pry tool like this is nice. Get under there, just pry that up. And one thing I do like when BMW does design something right, you can just open that flap and get to that last spark plug without having to remove any of this, so that's nice. And then on this side, pop up over here, and I think that is it. So now let's see if we can just slide this out from behind. Here. You might actually just slide it back and out of the way. Seems like it might be a little challenging to slide it up and over. I think that will give us enough room to access everything we're gonna need to, hopefully. All right, now that we have better access to the rear of the fuel pump, just gonna get on there, and crack that. All right, now we're just gonna let that sit for a little while to let all the fuel drain up. Now the new fuel line that Dorch includes, it replaces this entire section that runs along the back of the motor all the way over to here. So while we're letting our fuel lines drain over there, we're gonna go ahead and remove the DME, just get a little bit better access. Definitely make sure before you remove the DME, your battery is disconnected. You don't want any power going to this. It's a good idea also to take a quick picture. You can see that these lines are color-coded. We've also, just for an added step of precaution, taken a paint marker and just marked these from 1 through 5, or 1 through 6 rather, so that we know how to put them back. So to remove these, you just push the little clip in and then pop that down, and this will come out, and we can push that over to the side. Push that down. And when you reinstall this, definitely make sure these are fully seated. Sometimes they can trick you and you think they are. Always give them a nice firm pull up after you reinstall them to make sure that they're all the way down. All right, there's 2 clips that hold the DME in as well. You're just gonna pry those to the side, then pull up. One thing we didn't show, there's actually a cover that sits on top of this. It just pops right off. You just pull it right off and you'll have complete access to your DME. All right, so push those clips to the side and then pull this out, being careful not to pull any of the wires. All right. Now once you have this out, you wanna make sure this is set in a safe place where it's not gonna be exposed to any static electricity or anything like that. So don't go rubbing your feet against the carpet. All right, so we're just gonna set that there. All right, so first you're gonna pop this gray clip off. It's not too hard. You can use a pick tool if you need to. This is just a clip that prevents it from ever accidentally coming loose. Okay, so there's that clip. Now before I remove this, I am gonna put a microfiber towel here, but you're basically gonna push this black part up and in, and then you should be able to remove the line. But we wanna make sure that all our DME connections are fully covered. Now this is the low pressure side, so it shouldn't spray, but there is definitely gonna be some fluid in here, so try to cover this area as best as you can. All right, so now I'm gonna lift that up in the air so none of the fluid, or a little of the fluid, comes out. All right. This is definitely a good job to wear gloves on. You don't want to be getting dirt or contaminants on anything. You may even want to change your gloves during the installation process. Now you definitely want to put something over this. This isn't ideal, but it works. Just a clean bag that we had. You don't want to get any contaminants into your fuel system. Next, we have to remove this clip holding in the fuel rail right here. It's held in by an E6 Torx, external Torx. And we will not be reusing this bracket. Dorch actually includes a new bracket in their kit for the larger fuel line. Because I've raised that end of the line, you definitely want to make sure you have a towel over here. We did already, because that fluid is going to want to come out somewhere, and it's going to want to come out over here. Gently sneak this out. Work our way towards the passenger side. And once you get to that soft part, you can kind of pull that up and out. All right. Now we're going to put in the low pressure fuel line. You'll notice there's a blue end and a black end. You're going to want to put the blue end next to where the DME came out. Only one of these fits over the fuel pump. The black one fits, the blue one does not. All right, we fed the line back behind here, and we have it pushed on to this fuel line, the low pressure line coming from the rear of the car. So now we're ready to slip this little blue fitting on. And snug this up. Now, Dorch does recommend that you use an aluminum one if you have it, to make sure you don't scratch up the AN fitting. Now this is not, I'm gonna lie, an ideal place to tighten this up, even with the DME removed. It's still very hard to get in here, so just take your time with it. Don't mess up any of your DME wires. You just need to snug it. You don't need to kill these. Now we're ready to remove this hard line. Before we do that though, let's disconnect this electrical connection on the fuel pump. So we're gonna use a flathead screwdriver, just pop out that end. You should be able to squeeze and pull it off. If it's giving you a little bit of a trouble, like this one is for me, take a pick tool on the back side and lift up, and you can kind of see how the clip twisted. And there it goes. With the fuel line, it's held on by a little grommet right there. Now we're ready to remove the fuel pump itself. You want to loosen both of these T30 bolts on each side evenly. So you can either alternate back and forth. I have a little bit of a wonky setup on the back with a 1/4 inch socket and a T30 bit that wants to keep falling out, so I don't want to keep removing this one, so I decided just to set up 2 wrenches here. And you definitely want to remove it evenly because there is tension on the spring below the fuel pump, so you don't want anything to get bound up or twisted as it's coming out. So. You can see it kind of starting to create a little bit of a gap there from the pressure pushing it up with that spring. Carefully lift this up. Now you want to inspect your gasket right here, make sure it has no signs of wear or crack. As long as your vehicle's pretty new, you should be good. Dorch says these can be reused several times without failing. So take the Dorch supplied spacer, as well as the alignment tool, which we have installed in the center here. That goes like so. And then Dorch includes new mounting hardware. And we're going to use just a little bit of blue medium strength thread locker on these. Always a good idea when installing anything on a motor. There's a lot of vibrations. And these are also, as I mentioned, T30s. Now you want to tighten these down evenly, so go back and forth so that this seats evenly on the gasket underneath, and then torque these down to spec. All right. Before installing the new fuel pump, it's a good idea just to oil this up because this is going to be moving very quickly. Anytime you have metal on metal contact, it's not good, so put a little bit of oil in there. It's going to be a slightly different direction than the stock pump. It's going to sit something like that. All right. Now, definitely a good idea to keep these caps on. If you have caps to put over your fuel rails, definitely recommend doing that. We're just being extra careful around that, but never want to get anything in the fuel system. So keep these covered until you're ready to put the fuel line on. Just like with the other bolts, we are putting some thread locker on. And you're gonna have to play with it to get it lined up right. All right, now these are 5mm Allen heads. Just like removing the pump, you want to tighten this down evenly. So we're just going to go back and forth a little bit at a time. Again, just going back and forth. It takes a little longer, but it's worth it. All right, there we go. And it's sitting nice and flush. Now we're gonna go ahead and install the fuel rail. Now Dorch does say if for some reason the fuel rail doesn't seem to be lining up quite right, you can loosen these, and apparently there's a little bit of play in the fuel pump, so you might be able to swivel or pivot a little bit, but hopefully we don't run into that issue and everything lines up, but if it does, we'll tackle that when we get there. All right, so we're gonna take our low pressure line and slide that on. So, now I'll take this. Okay. All right, so we're ready for the fuel line. Dorch says first put this back one in and then rock it into the fuel pump and then put that one in. Now you should be able to tighten all of these down by hand. So if they're not threading on easily, like that one just did, then you aren't lined up straight enough. All right. And lastly, that one. Now there is a torque spec for these that I will put down in the description. It is very difficult to get these torqued properly. You need a crow's foot adapter, which we do have, and I'll link to that tool that you can put your torque wrench on. Just keep in mind when you use a crow's foot adapter, it does change the torque spec. So because you're putting the wrench out a little further, and unlike a socket, you're not directly on top of what you're tightening down, you're off to the side of it. So I'm just gonna, now these are not incredibly tight. Even when you remove them, they're pretty easy to remove. So we're just gonna snug each of these up. You can actually crack your fuel lines. And I guess if you do enough, the fuel rail too. So definitely be careful. Let's go back and check each one. Dorch includes this extender you're gonna need, so go ahead and plug that into the factory connection. It only goes in one way. Plug that in, and then make sure that's all the way in, and lock that in place like so. All right, so we're going above the fuel pump right there, and it's gonna be hard to see this on camera. I tried installing this from where Pete was standing, and I could not see what I was doing, so just push it on, and clip it in place. Nice and clean. No cutting, splicing of wires, no manhandling the fuel rail. Everything just fits the way it's intended. And we have one last piece to install, and then we're ready to reassemble. All right, so one thing that's gonna be a little bit annoying in the future when you work on your car is getting on to this E-Torx right here for this coil pack. So as we were reassembling, we noticed that, hey, we don't really have a straight shot onto this anymore. It's almost, but it doesn't quite clear. So what we ended up using, it's not a perfect fit. You might find something that fits a little better, but this multi-tool from like Craftsman, it fits a whole bunch of different size heads, and the 1/4-inch one seems to fit this somewhat well. Luckily, these are not too tight, but definitely don't go cranking down on it with this because you will definitely strip it. So, but again, the torque specs on these are extremely low, so you don't have to kill those. Now, Dorch has thought of everything, and they've even included a clip to replace the OEM one that goes right back here. You're going to reuse the OEM screw, and then the clip will hold this line right there. So that's the last thing to do. Installation's done, and your car should be good to go. Now, you will not have all of this stuff out of here. If you have removed your coil packs, pop those back in. And again, very, very important, make sure that your car is tuned to the Dorch Stage 2 fuel pump before you try to start it. I don't think anything catastrophic is gonna happen, but better play it safe than sorry. Make sure the right fuel pump is tuned for the car when you go to start it up. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any comments or questions, definitely leave them down. All the torque specs will be down in the description. And if you're interested in getting this fuel pump, definitely go through our links. We really appreciate it. It helps us out and helps us to keep bringing videos like this to you guys. And we'll have a lot more content coming on this BMW as well as other BMWs in the future. Next year, we're gonna be doing a turbo upgrade on this car. Maybe film it, not sure. Those installs can get a little tedious to film, but definitely will be additional videos coming out for the 540 as well as other G series models. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you back here next time.